Meet the Bloodthirster. I figure a little bit of metal is appropriate when you're watching the Bloodthirster. And he's going to be fighting up against Nurgle today. The Great Unclean One has been rocked by the forces of Nurgle. Let's put it on slow-mo very quickly. You're going to see some Pox Riders coming out as well. I feel like they're pretty metal. If they were running at you, you'd be pretty terrified. Exalted Plague Bearers of Nurgle. These guys are the best unit in this matchup. 100%. I'm telling you, they're vital. There's also a Soul Grinder of Nurgle, which, to be honest, a little bit weird. Now, what gets me about the Soul Grinder is, I often see people in this matchup leading things like normal Bloodthirster and Exalted, so double flyers, and the Soul Grinder of Nurgle just kind of sucks against that kind of build, because he's not very good against single entities. However, I've gone for something different because I think it's more versatile. I've gone for the double Exalted Bloodletters with Chaos Spawn of Khorne. So, Exalted Bloodletters, they're amazing, right? They've got fire damage and magic damage. They get the extra damage once they've killed a lot of enemies. Easy to do in this matchup because Forsaken and Nurglings are just butter to them. And then you've got your physical resist and your anti-infantry and armor piercing. They're great. They're good at everything. These guys will kick the ass of Plague Bearers and Forsaken really easily. The only thing that does better than them at killing stuff is the Chaos Warriors of Khorne. But the problem with the Chaos Warriors of Khorne is they don't do flaming damage and they don't have physical resist. They have armor, but Nurgle Rotflies are armor piercing, and the Death Heads have significant armor piercing. The Mortis Engine doesn't care about the armor piercing. You get the idea, right? There's a lot of things that they can do. Beast of Nurgle, I think it's better to have the fire damage here, because the fire damage means you do bonus damage against enemy cultists. You cut in half the regen that any enemy gets whilst they're under the effect of a healing spell, and you'll see in this game there's a lot of healing spells, and you also do extra damage against any Beasts of Nurgle. And I would argue Beasts of Nurgle are pretty good in this matchup as well, because again, they have armor piercing and they allow you to fight the Khorne monsters in a big blob. So a build that Turin made quite popular was double Beasts of Nurgle, double Cultists, and your Exalted Great and Clean One. Anyway, we haven't got that in this instance. But it's interesting, he's gone for this Soul Grinder, and that's actually a really decent counter to what I've got, because I've got a big blob of infantry. Now, what is the best thing to deal with Exalted Bloodletters? Well, if you're a Nurgle player, you want your Exalted Plague Bearers, who will stand up to them pretty decent in combat actually, but the Death Heads themselves do shitloads of damage, and then you've got your Soul Grinder as well. To be honest, Pox Riders will too, so it's almost like the opponent knew exactly what I was going for. I don't think he did. This was from quite a while ago, maybe he even did. Now, a strange choice on his behalf, I would argue, is getting these Plague Drones early on. Now, Plague Drones are quite good because they have armor piercing, so they're good if you're fighting against Khorne Berserkers, right? But I don't really understand the point of it because I've only got Bloodletters, and they're not going to do very well against Bloodletters. Either way, I control the sky at the moment because I've got an Exalted Bloodthirster, so I just send them straight after the Plague Drones, and rightfully so, my opponent lands them in his Death Blob, and I have to disengage, but not before I kill 2 of the Plague Drones. Only 12 in a squad, so that's decent. Now, I'm sending one basic Bloodletter that I spawned in to go over to this side. The good thing with basic Bloodletters in this matchup is they can easily defeat Nurglings and Forsaken and Plague Bearers, and they will thrash the Plague Bearers if they get the charge on them. If they don't get a charge, they actually trade pretty evenly. But yeah, so they're cheap, and they will secure that side nice and easily for me. They're countered by Toads, though. The Cultist is hiding in this side, so I can later engage and do a big pincer attack down to this area from both angles. Otherwise, I'm just sending my main force down to this edge. And as you can see, I'm summoning in more and more Furies, because I just want to have that mobility. Furies are really nice to tie up the Plague Bearers to make it a little bit harder for them to just sit there and throw grenades at you with their Death Heads. They still can when they use guard mode, but Furies just do so much damage that it punishes them for doing so. So that's exactly what I tried to do here. There's some sort of pathing problem here. I mean, it might have been a micro error, it might have been a pathing problem, but you can see I take a load of death heads to the face on my Chaos Spawn there. So straight away I'm trying to get my Furies in and my Bloodthirster. My Bloodthirster's actually noticed the Soul Grinder is isolated, so he's going after that, and the main melee blob is engaging here, and I've got a nice little pincer attack. The secondary cultist is moving in. I'm going to drop down some Bloodletters, which should do pretty good, and these forces will be defeated fairly handily. Now you can actually see that a spell is coming down here on the Exalted Plague Bearers, so they're using Fleshy Abundance, and just look at the level of healing that they get. But this healing right now, well, a second ago, but not right now actually, was reduced in half due to the fact that they were on fire, so that is a very pertinent thing to note. Now the Plague Drones actually flew up into the air at this point, so I just flew my Exalted Bloodthirster up, and along with the Furies, they're really easy to take down. So that was definitely a mistake on his behalf. The Plague Drones really did not pay for themselves at all. The Furies are getting kind of beaten up. I mean, a combination of the Modest engine from the Great Unclean One and the Mortar Shots from the Soul Grinder, it really does take its toll on them. But having this amount of DPS on the side, even with Pox Riders, the more elite Nurgle Cavalry, they're not going to hold this. He needs to get his Great Unclean One in there, but that's the whole point of what I'm doing. I'm splitting up my forces. I'm capping this side. I have most of the infantry on here to have already caught this, and now he's committed so much forces to this part of the map, I'm going to control this part of the map. So you never want to take a big giant blob fight against Nurgle. It's just never going to go well. That's what Nurgle exceeds at. And really, Nurgle is probably favoured in this matchup, though it may be dependent on the map. Anyway, Soul Grinder's on its own again. It's a perfect target for the Bloodthirster. I need to deal with this Soul Grinder as fast as possible. If I don't, its constant mortar shells are going to really hurt my Exalted Bloodletters. It doesn't matter whether it's normal Bloodletters, whether it's cheap Chaos Marauders, or whether it's Exalted Bloodletters. A artillery mortar is going to kill them just as easily. So I actually summon another Bloodletter spawn here to try and fend off these Pox Riders so they're not hitting my Exalted Bloodthirster in the back. And you see how quickly the Nurglings fall to the combination of Bloodletters and Chaos Furies of Khorne charging them in the rear. Now down here I made a bit of a mistake. I actually allowed him to get behind me with Exalted Plague Bearers here and failed to micro my units whilst the Nurglings are decapping. But you can see the amount of damage that they get from just one tiny half barrage of Death Heads. Really, really potent. Exalted Plague Bearers are amazing in this matchup. GUO once again is going to cast Fleshy Abundance. If we have a look at their actual HP while this is happening, now this is a lot of damage that I'm outputting. I've got 10 Chaos Spawn of Khorne, 75 Exalted Bloodletters, and you can see the net damage that I'm dealing is pretty much negligible. They're basically not losing any health. They're not really gaining much health, but they're also not losing any health. And that's with half healing, because they're on fire. So again, that is a testament to how useful that fire ability is. Now obviously it didn't help in that instance, but you can imagine in a massive blob fight it would be crucial. Now my opponent makes a bit of a mistake here because he's sending in Nurglings on his own, and the Nurglings really, they just get kind of wrecked, to be honest. I mean, they're running into Bloodletters, they're running into Chaos Spawn of Khorne and Fleshhounds, they just get devoured. They're a support unit, you know, they're super cheap, obviously they're going to lose to this stuff, but to just send them in on their own there, I don't really think it was a very wise move. Now I'm microing my Exalted Bloodthirster around. I want to try and get on the Exalted Great Unclean One here, and I pin him in place with my own Spawn of Khorne. These guys get absolutely sent flying. Now over on this side, I am going to actually lose this engagement with all the Death Heads hitting these guys and them already being slightly weakened from fighting the other troops, as well as the heal coming in. Those Exalted Plague Bearers and the Nurglings are going to beat me there. But the key thing for me right now is to just try and take down this Great Unclean One. Now unfortunately I do have the bug with my Exalted Bloodthirster where it's just flying near the opponent and not actually landing, so I take him away and I manually land him onto the ground, activate his ability to get extra weapon damage, charge him in and try and solo this Great Unclean One. I also spawn a Soul Grinder at this point because I just want, well, I want to kill the Great Unclean One, really, and I know the Soul Grinder is going to help me with that, but compared to like a Bloodthirster or anything like that, I think the Soul Grinder generally has better splash damage, and I like the armor that it has as well. It's very good against the infantry of Nurgle. So I think that's the niche. And again, Soul Grinder of Khorne, flaming damage. So he's now only getting half the healing that he normally would be, thanks to these flaming attacks. You do get flaming attacks on the Exalted Bloodthirster as well. So yeah, that fleshy abundance that he dropped on himself really didn't heal anywhere near as much as it probably normally would. And at this point, with a combination of the Exalted Bloodthirster, the Cultist of Khorne, and the Soul Grinder of Khorne, the GUO is going to fall. Now there is a massive infantry push coming down from the forces of Nurgle, but all this time, nothing has been able to contest this side because it's so awkward. I only spend 800 on these Bloodletters. They've got to spend 750 on a Forsaken, and then more resources on top of that, because even Forsaken on their own can't win that fight. But it does look like they're slowly going to capture the middle of the map, and like I say, I've lost this flank. I have no hope of contesting that. I can't deal with Exalted Plague Bearers, they're just way too strong. But the problem that the Nurgle player has right now is going to be dealing with his Soul Grinder. I mean, to be honest, the Exalted Bloodthirster is so low right now that he probably can just take him out with a spam of infantry. The Soul Grinder is going to be very difficult, as well as the Cultists of Khorne. Cultists of Khorne are awesome. This icon ability thing that they get, I think it's like 100 gold, but it's amazing. So long as you always stay in melee and you're not just running everywhere, then you will constantly be fresh because of the constant replenishment it grants. It's really nice, and that in turn means you've got higher stats, and you're just a nuisance. It's super hard to deal with in melee. Anyway, the Nurgle spam is slowly trickling away at me, so I need to summon some more reinforcements, and there you go, bingo! Exalted Bloodletters of Khorne, Bloodletters of Khorne. Check out the charge bonus on these guys, man. 30 on the Bloodletters, 36 on the Exalted Bloodletters. You've got to remember, when the Exalted Bloodletters start killing a lot of enemies, 80 in fact, 80 entities, they're going to get an extra 20% damage. They are such a good unit in this matchup. They just mop up all these bloody Nurglings. What's going on the far side? Not a whole lot, but he's moving his Exalted Plague Bearers over because he recognises that now, with all these Bloodletters in the middle, there is no way that he's going to be winning this engagement. He needs some backup. Poor little Nurglings can't hold. Does use his Fecundity Global. That's giving all these units vigor replenishment and healing. It's one of the better globals that Nurgle has for sure. Very strong. Pox Riders in here as well. I mean, this is just a lot of capping power. Now that I've got another unit of Bloodletters in here, I think the capping power slowly is starting to turn in my favour. I think I send these Bloodletters straight up to the Plague Bearers, because the Plague Bearers at this point, very weak. I do have the charge bonus, but really, I just want to stop them getting into this square, so that they don't even get their capping started. Same over here with the Soul Grinder, just pushing forward, hoping that it would surround and attack the Soul Grinder, and that means less entities inside this square, so I can actually gain control of it with any luck. Watch how the Bloodletters do over here, it's really quite amazing. And that was with Curse of the Slug as well. Weakening my charge slightly, but they just mop straight through them. I know obviously these guys were really weak, but the DPS output of Bloodletters on the charge is just beautiful. Truly a thing of glory, and at this point the forces of Nurgle have kind of run out of steam. Their infantry masses have been ripped to pieces by my spam of Bloodletters, as well as the occasional flank from Fleshhounds of Khorne and Chaos Furies of Khorne, and crucially the Soul Grinder and the Exalted Bloodthirster managed to isolate their key targets in the Great and Clean One of the Soul Grinder of Nurgle and take them out one by one. And at this point, it's going to be impossible for my opponent to get back into this game as I summon more reinforcements to get onto the points. I'm going to actually win it on points. Did actually send some Fleshhounds out on this side, and you can see how well they do against Nurglings 1v1. They ripped those Nurglings to pieces, lost barely any HP, not even 20%, and then are going to start capturing this part of the map. And at this point, there's just not going to be any time left for my opponent, really. They're just going to lose on points. So I'll just fast forward it at this point. And we get to 5,000, and that is going to be the end of the match. So we'll go into the analysis side of things here. Now, one thing that I want to say, if I just change the music slightly. One thing that I want to note is that I've seen people running double cultists from the start instead of the spawn of Khorne, and yes, there's value in that if you want to do a big blob fight, but the thing is, I really don't think you want to be doing a big blob fight, so I prefer to get the spawn of Khorne because it allows me to pick off any isolated units that overextend. If he sends Pox Riders too far forward, or if he has things like Beasts of Nurgle or his own cultists, maybe if they're on horseback, I can capture them, surround them with the spawn of Khorne, and get a free kill. You're not going to be able to do that if you're rocking double cultists of Khorne. In fact, you're probably going to want to just take a big blob fight, which favours Nurgle, and blow your load too quickly with your summons. So I prefer this kind of build, and then I bring my second cultist in as reinforcements. Now in terms of options, I think quadruple Furies is absolutely mandatory, and I think, to be honest, the Nurgle probably should be doing that as well. I like his choice of getting these Exalted Plague Bearers. As I say, I think Exalted Plague Bearers are absolutely fundamental for this matchup. As is the Exalted Great and Clean one. I mean, you can, I guess, go for a Herald on a Rotfly, but I don't think that's the way to do it. I guess it's map dependent. If you've got a map like this, I think it's fairly easy to hold 2 points, so Nurgle should be going for the big Death Blob, and the Great and Clean one is the best way to go for that. You've got Bloodletters in the back, they just go out and they hold the sidelines, or of course, in the end game, when you just need to cap a point, you just summon a load of them and throw them on the point. And that's the value with the Fleshhounds of Khorne. The Fleshhounds of Khorne are really fast, high damage, they do okay against enemy infantry. They won't trade great against Forsaken or Plague Bearers 1v1. The whole idea is you exploit their speed to get rear charges. And unlike the Furies, which obviously it is a bit easier to get rear charges with the Furies, the advantage of the Fleshhounds of Khorne is they actually cap. And the other use of Fleshhounds of Khorne is, as you've seen at the end of that last game, they will rip Nurglings to pieces. Cost for cost. They only cost twice as much as Nurglings, but you've seen they can kill a Nurgling squad and not even lose 20% of the HP, whilst being way quicker than the Nurglings. So yeah, a lot of value there. Soul Grinder, I mean, look at the value it got, it's amazing. Really good single target DPS on this thing. Not as much against large targets as a Bloodthirster perhaps, and obviously not being able to fly is a disadvantage, but the reason I like it is it's got really high armor, so it basically takes no damage from Forsaken, Plague Bearers or Nurglings whatsoever. Furthermore, it's got that cannon, so when it's running around chasing infantry, it just seems to kill infantry a lot faster. I also feel like it has more splash damage than the Bloodthirster versus infantry. That might not be true, that's what I think. Anyway, that's my analysis of the Khorne versus Nurgle matchup as it stands at the moment. Tomorrow, I'm actually going to post a video in which I show you the matchup from the Nurgle perspective, against the same player. Shout out to, let's see who this player was, it's Breakskid, who I was scrimming against for this one. Hey, we're not pros, but we're working on it. That's all from your boy Torpid. I'm out.